Yeah, so the Ba'ath Party, when they became in control, the Muslim Brotherhood, which Tim will talk more about what they did to make this happen, but the Ba'ath Party pretty much made it impossible for anybody to oppose them. So we're going to talk more about that.
Okay, so yeah, a lot of this stuff is happening at the same time. So at the same time, as the Muslim Brotherhood rose up, they rose up because Hafez al-Assad, he was pretty high up in the government, but he wasn't at the top. But him and his brother, I believe, they basically staged a coup, and with their friends who were also in other leading parts of the government, they took over the government. He became president. It was a bloodless coup. So actually, no one was killed or anything. It was just like slowly they just took over, and well, kind of overnight actually they took over. But they've been planning it for a while. So yeah, like Cameron mentioned, he changed the constitution, which made the Sunnis and the Muslim Brotherhood pretty upset, and so they started protesting a lot against the government. They wanted more of Islamic law in their country. And so from the period of 1976 to 82, they weren't crazy violent riots, but sometimes there were violent riots, with the police and whatnot. And finally there was a place called Hama that was like a Muslim Brotherhood stronghold, where there was a lot of them. And they were protesting so much and rioting so much, I guess, that finally the military went in and just basically destroyed almost the entire city, and they killed like 500 civilians there. Like they just basically didn't care. Like, we're just going to crush this no matter what it takes. And so by doing that, like they got rid of their opposition, and so al-Assad asserted his dominance in presidency, and crushed his opposition. But also from from what we learned in class, it's like similar to other totalitarian states. He was slowly, basically through the military, through also here new surveillance techniques that weren't available in the past. He was able to take complete control of the government, and by the government, take complete control of his country. And then he proposed a dynastic succession. So basically, he wanted he had two sons, and he was wanting the older one to be president, which some of the other government officials were kind of wary of, that's not really how we do things, but he was in control. His oldest son died in a car crash, but then he groomed his younger son to become president. Okay, so he ruled, and then he died, and his son became president, Bashar al-Assad. And he became president in 2000. And around this time, there was something that happened called the Damascus Spring, which was this period of intense opposition, activism, and political liberalization. So basically, there was a lot of political, dialogue and thought that was being thrown around, and people were talking about, is this. Where is the future of Syria? How's the government supposed to act? What's our future? And there's a lot of political debate going on, but it wasn't good for the current government. It was challenging. There was challenges to the government. So any protests and demonstrations like that were eventually suppressed by the government, which continued to create this totalitarian state. But the people, the citizens, from globalization, colonization, the technology, the internet, they've ideas such as democracy have been more widespread in their country, and so there was definitely groups of people that were trying to implement democracy and protest for those government reforms. And then what happened was the Arab Spring. So it happened first in Tunisia. There's a little blue one. There was a huge uprising and a revolution, and they changed their government and had a democracy. And then, one by one, all these countries in the Middle East started to overturn their governments. Some of them succeeded, some of them did not. Syria, in seeing in seeing their surrounding countries, the results that they were having, with all these things we've mentioned, like the political and religious conflicts that have been going on with the Muslim Brotherhood and ISIS trying to oust the government, and then with the people finally oh no, we want a new government, we want to change things. With all these things, and then finally seeing all these other countries revolt, it was just the spark that they needed. And basically, they started protesting. There started being riots and fights breaking out on January 26, 2011. And the government was really trying to crack down. Again, they've been doing it for the past 40 years, trying to push this thing down. In the first few months, in less than a year, there's 5,000 civilians dead. So not a very pretty state, I guess. Yeah, lots of conflicts going on. Some of the things that made it one of the things I wanted to mention is social media and the internet. That's made a big influence on the Arab Spring, and as well as the Syrian Revolution, or the current Syrian war, because they were able to see the news and the things that was happening in other countries around them, and then also it provided platforms where activists were able to communicate in ways that they wouldn't have been able to communicate without social media, to organize protests or marches or whatever. So technology played a huge role in the revolution.
All right, so one of the other topics that we talked about was a continuation of the Cold War. So there's a lot of outside forces that are kind of helping with that, are pretty much keeping the war going. The big ones are Russia and the United States, but there's also, like in the opening video, there's Iraq, Turkey, and there's some other Western countries that aren't playing such a major role, but they are playing. So like we mentioned in the beginning, the United States is against the Assad regime. They want Assad to step down. And Russia is supporting them, thinking that they need to stay at the same spot. And I think Iraq and Turkey are mostly just fighting because of the religious beliefs of the Sunni and the Shiites. So just a couple of quotes that I found from different interviews that I had read. This is one he's a Christian leader and in Damascus, and he was talking about how life is since this interview was in 2014. He was talking about how life was in Damascus around this time. He talked all about the hardships, and the final question that the interviewer asked, I don't remember the guy's name, but he asked, "What do you think about the American involvement inside of Syria?" He says, "With all due respect to the American people, we do not believe Obama's intentions. If we live in Syria, you are able to understand the whole picture. The problem is not whether we have democracy or not. This is a clash between Russia and the United States, and Syria is the battlefield. Even worse, Iran, China, Saudi Arabia, and Qatar are also players in the game. We do not believe when the Americans and Russians, we do believe that when the Americans and the Russians reach any possible agreement about involvement of gas and oil in the Middle East region, and especially in the coastal area, everything will be solved." So it seems like, I also read another interview, I should have put it in the slides, was Assad was pretty much talking about how once everyone else gets out of the war would end really quickly. Because Assad, he has the powers to stomp out the rest of the rebellion that's there. As you saw, one of the major groups was almost already gone, the blue group that was up at the top. And we just need to if Russia and the US get out, then it wouldn't be long before the rebel forces lose all of their supplies, their support, and Assad would take over the country and everything would stop the fighting. Then another one was from this one's a Syrian refugee, and so the question was, what happens if Assad doesn't step down? So pretty much, that's what this person says that he thinks a lot of Syrians want, is that Assad step down. And he says, well, if Assad refuses to step down, then the war will go on. The US and the EU intervention means bigger war. I'm not sure if war is ever a solution, but maybe it would rid us of Assad. It would destroy what's left of the country. In a better world, I wish for the US to stop arming the Kurds, for Russia and Iran to stop supporting Assad, and for EU and the USA to take our hands and help us build a better democratic country. I don't see this happening though. The borders are closed to refugees from Syria, and many people are dying everywhere. Maybe this will stop once Assad has no foes left inside, but then we are back to where we started and Assad remains. I think it's easy to assume that people are still in Syria and accept Assad. If the killing stops, they can walk safely. They also lost hope that we would get a better option, I guess. So it seems once again that the fighting would stop once all of the external forces would cease to be a factor in this war. And though I don't know if it's necessarily what the people want, but if Assad continues to rule, then at least they already have a stable government and they don't have to have something worse, because that's what a lot of the other countries in the Arab Spring happened. When they did their revolt, they got a government that was worse than the one that they had already started off with.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like only a few of them actually, I'm pretty sure actually only like 2 got a democracy. The rest are still either or are in turmoil, some are other ones have civil wars as well. So it's not it's definitely not like a simple answer as to like what the course of action is to take. Definitely this conflict really has been going on for a long time. It didn't just happen in 2011. Like really, a lot of this has been going on for hundreds of years, and whether it's because the world imposed borders on this country, whether it's because there is one dictator that's trying to rule it, or because religious factions can't mix. There's definitely a lot of questions that that a lot of questions as to why this is happening and as to whether there even is a common solution that could be reached.
Yeah. I think going along with what we learned in class from the long short way, whatever that article was, I think that it made a good point in relative to peace, because peace doesn't just mean not fighting. Like Syria, before they had broken out of civil war, they had so many demonstrations of violence that you can't actually say that they were in a time of peace. Especially looking back on the history, Syria has gone through so many changes and so many demonstrations that have turned violent that I don't think they've ever really experienced long periods of peace in their history. But I also kind of disagree with the article in a way. I don't think that there's one thing that solves all the problems. It's important, of course, to see each other as people, but I think the biggest thing is that these problems are rooted way far into the past, and there's not really, just like what Tim said, there's not really one answer fits all. And I mean, of course, we want to search for it, but I guess the important thing is just know what's going on first, and then try to figure out what we can do. Yeah.
Thank you.
The end.
We'll work on that.
We'll work on that.